Welcome to episode 2 of Checks and Balances. My name is Tabitha Sarabahali, and thank you for joining me this evening as we tackle the issues that you care about. First on the agenda this evening, I want to make something absolutely clear. We Invest in Nationhood is united, and we reject anonymous fabrications and politically motivated attempts to create division. WIN does not conduct its affairs through rumors or unnamed sources, and we will not be distracted by manufactured narratives. WIN therefore expects that before the presentation of the 2026 budget on January 26, that the Speaker of the National Assembly will heed the calls of many concerned Guyanese and key stakeholders and take the necessary steps to ensure that our parliamentary process reflects the democratic standards we profess to uphold. The government and the Speaker now face what I would consider an important decision: whether to act in accordance with the long-standing constitutional norms or to allow this impasse to define this moment in our parliamentary history. They have 1 week to figure themselves out, and making up propaganda will not change the fact that every attempt they have made has failed. Now, today, I want to deal with an issue that I think is very important. We've seen a whole lot of allegations and concerns regarding the rapid accumulation of wealth by senior public officials. The leader of WIN, Mr. Abzuddin Mohammed, has brought to the public some very damning allegations about the Minister of Tourism and the Minister of Agriculture. In response to public concerns about what has unearthed and calls for an independent investigation and resignation of these public figures, the President has stated publicly that he is content with the explanations given by the current Minister of Tourism. This program this evening asks one central question. When serious questions arise about wealth accumulation by public officials, what do Guyana's laws require? What are their weaknesses? And who should be responsible for investigating, not excusing, those concerns? Let us start by examining the laws. Guyana's laws, what Guyana's laws currently says about corruption and wealth. We first have the asset declarations through the Integrity Commission Act. You may have heard about the Integrity Commission and the fact that public persons that are in public life are required to declare their assets, their income, and their liabilities annually. These declarations are submitted to the Integrity Commission, and once the declarations are submitted, Articles 17A and B of the Integrity Commission Act state the following: that the Commission or the President, as the case may be, shall receive, examine, and retain all declarations and documents filed with it or him under this Act, and make such inquiries as it or he considers necessary in order to verify or determine the accuracy of the financial affairs as stated in the declarations of persons who are required to file declarations under this Act. Now, that is a whole lot. But as I began to research and go deeper into this Integrity Commission Act, I found several weaknesses which I will just point out today, but will go in depth later on. The first and most troubling weakness is in that same article, where it says that the President of this country has complete access to the personal financial information and has investigatory discretion over all public officials, including members of parliament, the opposition figures, senior public officials. This is not normal, but we will look at this later. Other weaknesses include that the declaration, for example, are not routinely audited, and the Commission has very limited investigative capacity, and failure to explain well does not automatically trigger an investigation. So these are some of the issues with the Integrity Commission Act. Simply put, there is no offense of unexplained wealth in Guyana. There is no what we would call no illicit enrichment law in Guyana. And no illicit enrichment law means the following: that if a public official becomes wealthy in a way their legal income cannot explain, they must prove the wealth was obtained honestly or face penalties. Unlike other countries, Guyana does not criminalize illicit enrichment. It does not reverse the burden where unexplained wealth must be justified through investigation, and it does not require proof beyond self-explanation. This, I believe, is a major gap. Guyana also has no independent anti-corruption agency. If you can recall, when the PPP came into power in 2020, they dismantled the State Asset Recovery Agency, leaving us without any single institution that can have the authority to investigate senior officials. No authority is there to recover assets, and no authority is there to refer matters for prosecution, which means allegations go nowhere. When we put all of these gaps together, what it means is simply that a public official can accumulate significant wealth, provide a private explanation to the president, and that explanation can be accepted without investigation. This is not because the official is proven innocent, it is simply because the system is weak. In stronger systems, explanations would have to be tested. Documents are verified, investigators have to do the investigations, and not politicians decide credibility. I can see some government members, for example, trying to push back by saying that, for instance, we have what we call the Criminal Law Offences Act, where sections 333 to 338 of said act deals with bribery and corruption. Section 334 specifically says that public servant taking a gratification other than legal remuneration in respect of an official act, that is what 334 deals with. So a person who gives or agrees to give gratification to influence a public servant's official actions corruptly also commits an offense. That's what 334 deals with, right? A person who gives or agrees to give gratification to influence a public servant's official's action. So if somebody comes into a public servant and requires of the public servant to do something and will give them something for them to do, what we consider an official act can be deemed corrupt or corruption and would be seen as an offense. Then we have section 335, which deals with taking a gratification in order by corrupt or illegal means to influence a public servant. This section targets corrupt conduct where a person accepts or attempts to obtain gratification for exercising personal influence with a public servant. Now, what all of this basically means is that anyone who is or expects to be a public servant and accepts, obtains, or if they agree to accept or attempt to obtain any gratification, anything of value, other than lawful pay as a reward or motive for doing or forbearing to do an official act, or for showing favor or disfavor in official functions, they commit an offense. That is what it says. So while this section of the Criminal Offence Act exists, what is required is a high burden of proof. The Integrity Commission lacks direct investigatory and prosecutorial powers. It's difficult for them to investigate and prosecute. Apparently, in relation to the Integrity Commission, the president can do that. He can investigate everybody. And the fact that the Integrity Commission doesn't have that prosecutorial power, and they cannot they may refer matters to enforcement. What we have is that we have gaps between detection of an issue and prosecution of an issue. Then we have the other issues where enforcement often relies on police or the DPP action on referrals without a specialized anti-corruption prosecutorial structure. Now, this is a lot of big words going on here. A lot of things are being said. But basically what it means is that there is an act that exists that deals with bribery, that deals with abuse of office, and it requires clear evidence of corrupt intent. It requires clear evidence of gratification and clear evidence of causation between the benefit and the official act. So the onus now is on the state to show where that action happened. The state would have to show, okay, this person paid this person this amount of money for this particular act. It's a lot difficult sometimes to show, right? Because you may know that something happened, but normally there may not be a camera there that would have a conversation where the conversation has been taped to know, well, this money was passed because this person wanted this public official to do something that was seen as corrupt or is deemed corrupt. And so the evidence that is required to make this whole Corruption Offences Act prosecutorial is sort of very difficult. It's not impossible, but the gathering of financial records, the witness testimonies that are required, and the proof of illicit exchange is usually very legally complex and is sometimes very difficult to show in a court. Whereas if the country had what is called the illicit enrichment law, this will place the burden of proof on the public servant to explain where the wealth comes from. This is what we don't have. So if someone in public office suddenly becomes much richer and their salary or known income cannot reasonably explain that wealth, the law would allow the state to question, to investigate, and potentially punish them unless they can show the money or property was obtained lawfully. So this changes or shifts the burden to the individual who has gotten wealthy. So it's not a case that you have to show when or where the bribe took place or when or where the conversation happened that if you do this, I will give you that. The burden now is on the person who got wealthy to show how it is they were able to amass such wealth over a short period of time on their salary that cannot necessarily explain the wealth that they currently have. So, in response to all of the allegations, the president of this country publicly stated that he accepted the explanation given by a minister regarding her wealth. Anyone serious about governance would recognize that this statement highlights a serious governance problem. I don't know about you, but I think it highlights a serious governance problem. And what is this problem? The main problem is that the president is not an investigator. He is not an independent and not the appropriate authority to determine innocence. He may want to claim somebody's innocence, but he is not the appropriate authority to determine innocence. His public pronouncement creates a perception of what I would call political shielding and erosion of public trust. It's a substitution of process with personal assurance. So we have to take the president's word that whatever he was told by the minister was good enough, and so we should just look somewhere else because he is satisfied that she did nothing wrong. If we were a properly governed society in this 21st century, the process would look much different when allegations arise, especially about a sitting minister of government. The president should refer the matter, not resolve it, and an independent body should, 1, review the asset declarations, verify the income sources, examine the property acquisitions, both local and foreign, and liaise with the foreign authorities if needed. And findings, not explanations, should determine the outcome. A president does not clear ministers. Institutions do. So the big question now is who should be investigating and why they currently are not. In an ideal world, Guyana would have an independent anti-corruption commission or a strengthened integrity commission with forensic audit powers, prosecutorial referral authority, and guaranteed independence, none of which exists in any of our laws and the organizations and institutions that are supposed to do any of these investigations. The reality is simple. It is that in Guyana today, no such body exists. And thus investigations depend on 1, the political will, 1, on the resource agencies that rely on political instructions and discretionary actions. That is the real issue. The court checks and balances. So if a country is serious about fighting corruption, allegations of unexplained wealth are not settled by presidential confidence. They are resolved by laws. They are resolved by institutions and by transparent investigation. The problem in Guyana is not that explanations are given. The problem is that there is no system strong enough to test the explanations given. And checks and balances exist so that no one minister or president becomes judge and jury in their own government. If we want public trust, explanations are not enough. Accountability requires institutions that work. And right now, our institutions simply are not working. Now, I want to move to something quite sad. We looked at what is happening with our laws and the institutions that should function and are not functioning as effectively as they should as it relates to corruption. But it appears as though all of our institutions need help. and the current policies that are in place, the structures that are in place, are really not working for the Guyanese people. Today, I listened as the family of young Marissa Eastman detailed what transpired at the Georgetown Public Hospital that led to her untimely death and the death of her 6-month unborn child. I know by now many of you have heard the details. Many of you have seen the posts. The details that the family gave raises grave issues of professional negligence and systemic failure in a public health institution. You know, this afternoon when myself, the leader of WIN, Mr. Asudin Mohammed, and Ms. Odessa Primus met at the home of the family of Marissa Eastman, it was saddening to hear the details of the story. Mr. Mohammed contacted the family and requested that we come to listen to them to hear what exactly transpired, because a lot of things were being said on social media. They agreed, and so we were able to meet with them this afternoon. But the details that the family gave, I think, raises some serious issues of professional negligence and what I would call systemic failure in our institution. Once that young woman was admitted to a public hospital, the state assumed responsibility for the patient's safety and treatment at all times. That goes without saying. Once the young woman was admitted to a public hospital, the state assumes responsibility for the patient's safety and the patient's treatment at all times. If harm occurs, which did happen in this case, the hospital, and by extension the state, cannot avoid responsibility by pointing to any individual failures within the system. So I expect that somebody may want to blame a nurse or but this is a systemic failure. The state is expected to continuously monitor the patient and unborn child, give timely medical intervention where necessary, assess the risk for self-harm, and perform reasonable preventative measures once a foreseeable risk is identified. The family spoke about her behavior. The families gave explicit warnings to the nurses and the staff at the hospital and requested that the young lady be restrained or sedated because they felt that she needed to be calmed. Right? And this clearly should have triggered a heightened duty of care. But apparently it didn't. And at that point, inaction is not neutrality. It is a breach, a simple breach. There also seems to be what I would call, there's a term called clinical escalation. Basically, the family indicated to us that the gynecologist was on site to look and ensure that the baby was fine. They called in a psychiatrist to check to see whether what was the state of her mental health. But neither of them could have gone further because they were both waiting on a general doctor to come to tell them how to proceed with the patient. The general doctor never arrived. And because the general doctor never arrived, nothing further was done to this patient. So the cries of the family to restrain her, the cries of the family to sedate her, went on deaf ears because they were waiting on a doctor that never appeared. Then, at the end of all of that, where they did nothing for the patient, they then sought to force the family out of the patients, out of the ward, because apparently it was the end of visiting hours. So not only did they force the family out, but they had no supervision in place, given all that the family indicated to them of what was the issue with the patient. So they substituted there was no supervision. They forced the family out and left the patient unattended. This is tantamount, as far as I'm concerned, to recklessness, particularly when the families, I keep saying, explicitly warned of the danger. Then we were further told that the young lady's body stayed at the scene for hours before the body was removed. Something has to be wrong with our system. How could a young lady jump, fall, however, to her death from the top of a hospital to the ground and lay there on the ground for hours? Everybody is looking around, waiting on something to happen before they move the body. No check on the mother, no check on the baby. They just lay there. Nobody came close other than a family member for hours. After an hour and a half, then they decided to get a cloth to cover the patient. Something has to be wrong with our system. We have a pregnant patient behaving abnormally, left unattended, presenting an obvious risk, and we do nothing. Too many breaches occurred. No interim safety measures were implemented. No continuous supervision was provided. No escalation protocol was activated, so that if the doctor did not appear or failed to appear, what happens next? And then the family members were removed. I am no lawyer, but it seems very clear to me that the absence of supervision and safeguards enabled the act, and the family has serious grounds to pursue civil action for negligence. Checks and balances fail when such deaths are treated as isolated tragedies rather than systemic warnings. A pregnant 22-year-old woman sought care through her family. Her family raised the alarm that she was not in the right state of mind. The state accepted responsibility, and then the state failed, and then failed again, and failed again. Checks and balances exist precisely for moments like this, to ensure the truth is established, that responsibility is assigned, and remedies are provided. Systems need to be corrected. No other family should endure such a preventable loss. Our sincere condolences to the family of Marissa Eastman. May she rest in peace, and may you and your unborn child get the justice you deserve. I do not think it is too much to expect our institutions, our healthcare system, our educational system, and the social services we so rely on to do better for the people. Much more is expected, and much more can be delivered to the people of this country. This brings us to the end of Checks and Balances today. We'll see you again next Monday as we continue to discuss the issues that concern you. Good evening.